General Vthrak's ceremonial armor cracked under the harsh studio lights. The undefeated commander of the Imperial Guard sat in a cheap civilian broadcast chair, both hands resting empty on his knees. No weapons remained on his heavy leather belt. His mandibles clicked together in a dry, percussive rhythm, a biological tell of terminal uncertainty. Looking directly into the camera lens, he addressed 2 million of the galaxy's most lethal soldiers. He opened his mouth, choosing to dismantle a 300-year legacy of honorable warfare in a single breath. He was going to surrender. What I witnessed didn't just end a campaign. It broke the mathematics of war itself. 3 months earlier, Valkyrie Prime fell. The subsonic hum of a holographic dot vanishing in the circular council chamber signaled the enslavement of 300 million people. Zix Athra rubbed her lower right eye, her professional detachment faltering. Across the vast room, Earth's representative stood up. Ambassador Chen adjusted his dark collar. "We will deploy 1 division," Chen said to the panicked assembly. 20,000 personnel. Desperate laughter echoed through the vaulted hall. 20,000 humans against 3 million Catharn was simple arithmetic, not a viable military strategy. Chen did not smile. He simply promised that they wouldn't like how humanity fought, but they would appreciate the results. The rupture was a strategic nexus world of dense boreal forests and cavernous subterranean ruins. If the Catharn Dominion secured it, they would split the Council's remaining territory in half. Catharn dropships blackened the sky for hours. They established massive fortress camps with kinetic railgun batteries pointing toward the heavens. Zix embedded with Human Strike Team 7, her forearm trembling as their pod hit the damp earth. The humans didn't form rigid ranks. They scattered like insects into the pine needles and ozone-scented fog, carrying heavy crates of strange acoustic gear. Commander Sira Okonkwo wore plain field gray. No medals decorated her chest. "Move," she ordered, her voice clipped. "Fade." They vanished into the wilderness, and then the enemy started to vanish too. By sunset, the 1st Catharn Frontline Battalion entered New Threshold City. 10,000 elites marched into the crumbling urban center. At dawn, absolute silence reigned. No bodies littered the cracked streets. No laser signatures scorched the concrete walls. The entire galactic assembly stopped laughing. A 2nd battalion marched into the ruins to investigate the anomaly. Zix watched the orbital feeds from a camouflaged dugout deep in the boreal ridge. She expected a brutal massacre. Instead, 8,000 more troops simply ceased to exist as a cohesive fighting force. Half-eaten meals sat on metal mess tables. Rifles lay stacked neatly near the massive command tents. Inside the damp dugout, an older human named Marcus set a cracked ceramic mug on a folding metal table. The sharp clack cut through the ambient tension. The printed text faced outward, ridiculous and openly defiant in a war zone. "I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right." Marcus moved like drifting smoke despite his gray hair. He tapped a glowing navigational console. "Phase 1, Marcus muttered, pouring terrible synthetic coffee. "Total isolation." Sonic jammers activated across the entire northern sector. Communication channels dissolved into impenetrable acoustic static. "Phase 2 is worse," Marcus added, or rather it was significantly louder. Artificial distortion warped the freezing nighttime air. Broadcasters blasted captured Catharn voices screaming in the pitch black. Zix's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly. It wasn't a traditional battle. It was a calculated psychological autopsy designed to shred nerve endings. Phase 3 brought absolute mechanical precision. Human snipers didn't target high-ranking command officers. They targeted fragile water purifiers. They shot the engine blocks of heavy supply convoys winding through the mountain passes. Cargo drivers woke up sedated in muddy ditches, their transport vehicles stripped of all nutritional rations. The humans had requested 4 million microsensors from the Council, seeding the entire planet from high orbit. The rupture transformed into a live, breathing nervous system. Every underground water source became a mapped vulnerability. Every convoy route became a mathematical trap waiting to spring. The Catharn could not fight an invisible enemy they could not physically perceive. Emperor Krathjan escalated the grinding conflict from his distant throne world. 2 million elite Imperial Guard landed, ordered to purge the planet's surface completely. They were counterinsurgency veterans with decades of brutal combat experience. They built impenetrable steel bases surrounded by automated plasma turrets. But institutional pride is a terrible substitute for daily calories. Zix watched the slow starvation take hold over 3 grueling weeks. General Vithrak commanded a frontline vanguard battalion of 500 scarred veterans. His men ran out of clean drinking water on the 12th day. 3 younger soldiers collapsed from parasitic soil infections on the 14th. Then the hidden human broadcasts changed their frequency entirely. 2 kilometers west, a calm mechanical voice echoed through the ancient towering trees. Supplies, medicine, warm food, no hidden traps, safe surrender zone 5 kilometers north. Vithrak ordered his desperate men to hold the defensive line. He promised devastating orbital support that never materialized. Zix tracked the fading thermal signatures from the buried command bunker. 10 soldiers deserted on the 2nd night. 20 left on the 3rd. Within a fortnight, Vithrak's 500 had dwindled to barely 200. They weren't dying in glorious kinetic combat. They were walking away in the dark, choosing basic biological necessity over an empire's rigid cultural mandate. Zix's forearm spasmed violently as she reviewed the shifting logistical data. You are just letting them walk away into the woods without firing a single shot. We shoot equipment, Okonkwo said, her eyes locked on a glowing green tactical map. We feed the hungry. Dead martyrs inspire future recruits. Living cowards break massive empires from the inside. Of the 2 million Imperial Guard originally deployed, only 400,000 still held their designated military posts. 800,000 sat securely in human-run medical camps, eating warm synthetic protein. The rest hid terrified in the deep cave networks, paralyzed by the suffocating absence of noise. The Catharn required the violent friction of kinetic combat to maintain their psychological equilibrium. Deprived of a visible target, their vast institutional pride collapsed inward completely. General Vithrak had one strategic choice left, and it wasn't a military one. Inside the heavily shielded orbital command center, Zix stared at the primary holographic monitor. General Vithrak sat in the captured civilian broadcast booth. His ceremonial armor hung loose on his massive reptilian frame. He stared directly into the recording lens. Behind the Catharn commander, Okonkwo leaned casually against a communications console. She quietly wiped a speck of dust from her datapad screen. A perfectly mundane gesture, while the entire galaxy held its collective breath. I am General Vithrak, the commander broadcasted across every open planetary frequency. 30 years of loyal service. 15 successful campaigns. His voice, usually a booming instrument of supreme authority, cracked under the crushing weight of his reality. I cannot win this campaign, not because the humans are physically stronger, because they are infinitely smarter. They do not fight to kill, they fight to end fighting. His yellow eyes, filmed with severe dehydration and absolute physical exhaustion, pierced the digital feed. To all Catharn forces remaining on the rupture, there is no shame in basic survival. Our leaders sent us to die for empty pride. The humans offer us life. I choose life. I hope you do too. The feed cut to sharp static. Zix stopped breathing. A legendary commander had just publicly dismantled the core concept of honorable defeat for the entire universe to witness. Okonkwo didn't celebrate the monumental victory. She tapped her perfectly clean datapad. Phase 4 complete, the human said. Begin full repatriation procedures. Emperor Krathjan watched the live feed from his distant throne room, realizing the 2 million soldiers returning home were a far deadlier ideological infection than any kinetic weapon ever forged. 3 weeks later, the massive council chamber remained entirely silent as Commander Okonkwo walked to the center podium. She still wore plain field gray. No new shiny decorations marked her unwrinkled uniform. The Valkyrie representative leaned forward, his voice a hushed, reverent whisper. How did 20,000 defeat 2 million heavily armed warriors? Okonkwo paused, her dark eyes scanning the circular room. We didn't defeat them. We convinced them to stop fighting. There is a distinct mathematical difference. The Dominion had prepared their populace for broken, tortured prisoners of war. Instead, 2 million healthy, fully fed troops returned to their sprawling empire carrying stories of human kindness. The resulting cultural shockwave forced Emperor Krathjan to request the first diplomatic summit in 3 centuries. The relentless territorial expansion halted immediately. A historic treaty was drafted, not with orbital lasers, but with careful diplomatic ink. Years later, Zix Athra walked through the grand public archives of Valkyrie Prime. Her forearms no longer trembled with anxious dread. She stopped at a fortified glass display case near the planetary military history wing. Inside the illuminated box sat a cheap ceramic mug. The jagged crack down its side had been carefully filled with kintsugi gold, catching the bright overhead light. The printed words gleamed against the stark white clay. Next to the cup, a small brass placard caught the reflection of a passing university student. The metal plaque held no long list of glorious casualties. It just listed a calendar date, a woodland planet, and a single sentence about a weapon that ended a war without firing.